Great.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Kenneth L. Herman Jr., Chief HR Officer for Fulton County Government, and I want to welcome you to the first of many, what I would say, interesting and different educational series for you as employees. Typically, we spend a lot of time training you on customer service and how to do your job, but very little time telling you about how to manage your health, manage your wealth. But we've now shifted to focus on some of those programs as a little bit more as we pursue to be the employer of choice, how we could focus on those programs to make you a better, well-rounded employee. And part of that conversation is going to be had with my good friend now, Jackie, who I met previously in one of my battles with insomnia. And to cure my insomnia, I typically jump on YouTube and watch some interesting videos from, how ball bearings work. And if you want to know how ball bearings work, I can tell you about that. But one night I fell down this rabbit hole called FIRE. And part of that, and FIRE stands for Financial Independence, which is going to be the focus of our program, and then the RE stands for Retire Early. And part of that presentation led me to Jackie and her story as to how she made a commitment to get from point A to point B in a very significantly short period of time with, I would say, modest resources, not the typical resources what you see in a FIRE environment. And I just thought it would be beneficial that you as Fulton County employees could not only hear the presentation, but also see it. And then we have a series of classes to support it, to help you also achieve the FI, if in fact you so choose. And I think this is one of the most noteworthy trainings that we'll be offering in the next couple of years to get you on that financial independence path. From all the way from making sure your credit report, I'm thinking about the 800 Club, if you know about the credit reports, starting from there all the way to generational wealth and financial independence, and kind of breaking down the wall of, talking about money is very taboo in many instances. And I think if we could break down that wall and have conversations, not getting into everyone's business about what they're spending their money on and what they're using the money on, but just having conversations about how they can generate financial independence and wealth, I think would move us along just as a whole community within Fulton County. So I've talked too long already, and I just want to turn it over to Jackie so she can introduce herself and begin her presentation. And hopefully the individuals online are hearing us, and we're going to be trying to try our best to monitor the chat that comes in online and answer any questions from that perspective. But bear with us if we're having any technical difficulties. This is our first time trying this in the HR unit, but we typically excel at everything we do. But we will make sure you get your questions answered either in person or in some communication thereafter. So Jackie, floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Ken. I was floored when you reached out and wanted me to come in and talk to your employees about how to leave Fulton County early. But just kidding. But it is kind of ironic, but I think employers, including Fulton County, they know that employees don't necessarily stay with an employer forever anymore. So you might as well give them as many tools and resources and as much value as possible while they're there. That's a smart thing to do. Because frankly, even though I retired super early, I was with my company for 20 years. So I gave them 20 good years. And so it didn't mean that I didn't want to work at all or I didn't value my employer. But there's an expiration date usually. Maybe we want to go on and do something else and so forth. So my name is Jackie Cummings Koski, and I reached financial independence and retired early in my 40s. And I've been with my company, as I mentioned, for 20 years. And I was ready to make a transition after that point. And for the longest, I didn't even know I could retire that early. So as Ken mentioned, I am just really tired of the topic of money being so taboo. Like if someone asks you how much you made, even though they can go to the county website and find it, would you really feel comfortable talking about it? Okay, what if somebody asked you how much debt you had? You know, how much you had in student loans? What's your credit score? We wouldn't talk about those things. And in my presentation today, there's a lot of mistakes that I made. There's a lot of things that I did wrong, but I learned from them. And I just remember thinking, I wish I would have known some of these things, but people aren't as open with talking about money, especially when it's negative. So today I want to throw the taboo of talking about money out the window. So I'm going to be real vulnerable with you today. I share my numbers, I share what I saved, what I invested. I'm sure there's things I might have left out. You can ask questions if you want to, but it is all in the name of normalizing these conversations around money. So what do you say? Let's get started. There we go. Just a quick disclaimer. You know, everything we're talking about today is going to be for information and educational purposes only. So like I mentioned, for a long time, I didn't even know you could retire this early. Like for instance, the Social Security Administration says you need to be 62. That's what they consider early retirement. And then in order to get money out of a lot of your retirement accounts, you have to be 59 and a half. So that was their idea of retiring early. And then we get down to about 55. I know my company, you would not be eligible for any retirement benefits if you left before age 55. Like I would even go onto our 401k website and you can estimate your retirement age. You couldn't even go below 55. So finally, I decided for myself that I wanted to retire in my 40s. And I call it firing. And my daughter, she's a graphic designer. She designed the little candy bars, and that was at my retirement party. Luckily, I had to send off, and I'm sure Ken would do this too. I had to send off like any other retiree person. We were at the steakhouse and all of that, so that was cool. But again, firing, FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. So here is a little bit more about me. So as I mentioned, I retired at the age of 49. I reached financial independence a little bit earlier than that, but I wasn't quite ready to leave. I retired in December 2019. And actually my exact retirement date was December 6th, 2019. And I call it my new birthday, really. And I'm divorced. I was with my company, as I mentioned, for 21 years, became a single mom, African-American single mom. And I have one daughter, and I made less than 6 figures. So I wasn't even making the big bucks. But this is kind of my profile here. So as I mentioned, it was a bumpy road. Like I didn't come out the womb with a silver spoon in my mouth. Actually grew up in poverty, semi-close to here. I grew up in Georgia and South Carolina. And Aiken, South Carolina was the town that I was in. And we were in poverty. And so I had a lot of setbacks, a lot of failures, just a lot of flailing around. I mean, I barely knew what I was doing for a really long time. So I was 38. Is anybody here under the age of 38 and think they're old? You're not old. I'm just waking up at 38. I mean, I was feeling so behind at 38, and I'll show you some of these numbers, but really, when I started getting going, it took about 10 years to get things in place. So if you think it's too late, it's definitely not. I was really shocked, especially with kind of the head start you have. You know, you have a company match, you've got some of these extra things that are gonna help you. So let's talk a little bit about my timeline. Now my timeline starts where most people's timeline starts, your childhood. So growing up, as I mentioned, I grew up in South Carolina, Georgia. I was raised by a single dad with 6 kids. We lived, it was really a town outside of Aiken. It wasn't formally Aiken, South Carolina, but it was up a dirt road. I hated living up that dirt road. But my dad, he raised 6 kids. We lived in this ranch home. It couldn't have been more than like a 1,200, 1,500 square foot home. And I just still don't know how he did it. He worked at a factory or like a mill, like back in the day, textile mills were big down south. And so he worked there, and then he always had a second job. His second job was like working at a construction company, like in the evenings and on the weekends. So he was always working, always working. What's he doing when he's working? Or, trying to take care of his kid. So I just remember when I was a senior in high school, he got cancer. And he was one of those guys that never went to the doctor. So I knew that something must have happened to make him go to the hospital or the doctor, because his response probably would be, I don't have time to go to the doctor. I'm working and I'm raising these kids. So he had brain cancer, but I found out that it actually started out as colon cancer and it didn't get treated. So it spread to his brain and the rest of his body. So as you guessed it, he passed away of cancer. And I just remember, watching this strong, hardworking dad go to the point where when he got sick, he had to, put his arm around the shoulder of one of my sisters to go to the bathroom because his legs had gotten too weak. So that was really devastating to see. And here I am, I'm a senior in high school. I'm 18 years old, barely grown. I was a brand new teenager still at that point. And so after he passed away, it was March of that year that he passed away. And I graduated about 3 months later in May, so he never got to see me graduate. But I did manage to go on to college. And you're not going to get rich in college. I was a poor college kid. I went to Augusta State. Anybody familiar with Augusta State? They've changed the name 4 times since I left. But I went to Augusta State University. It's called Augusta College at the time. And the way I got through school, I got a little bit of grant money. I got a little bit of scholarship money. But mostly I worked 2 jobs, just like my dad. And looking back, I don't know that was the smartest thing to do. Maybe I could have worked harder on my grades and got more scholarships. Maybe I could have done work study. I don't know. But I didn't feel like I did it the smartest way. But I was able to, I was working full time, 50 plus hours a week. And then I was taking a full load of classes at school. And that was, at the time, it was like 3 to 4 classes. And I was just trying to do what everybody else was doing, except I had to work 2 jobs to get my way through. So obviously something had to give, and it was my grades. Like, I think the lowest GPA you could have to graduate was a 2.5, and I had a 2.6. So I barely got through. I almost flunked out of college. But luckily, my degree did not have a GPA on it. So it did what I hoped it would do. Ever since growing up in poverty, the one reoccurring thought in my head was, I didn't want to be in poverty again. When I get older, I don't want to be in poverty. When I have my daughter, I don't want to be in, thinking about that generational wealth. So I wasn't even just thinking about myself. I just wanted to sort of change the trajectory. I wanted to change that cycle of poverty. And at the time, the most measurable way that I could do that would be to go to school and get a degree. So I did graduate. I got a decent job. I actually worked for Walmart when I was in high school, when I was in college. And my first real job out of college was with Walmart at their headquarters in Bentonville. So I loaded up and I went to Bentonville, and it was just kind of different too. A lot of families will support their kid going off to college. They're packing them up. You got, the whole family going. Well, I didn't have that. My dad was gone. My mom wasn't around. And I had one brother, Charles. He helped me get the Ryder truck, hooked up my car on the back, guided me out of the driveway, and that was it. And I just remember that day it was raining because tears was going down my eyes. And that was one of the hardest things I had to ever do. So I had to drive 14 hours by myself in this Ryder truck with my car hooked on the back, going all the way to Bentonville, Arkansas, because to me, it was a good job and I was going for it. So that's how that worked out in college. So shortly after I moved to Arkansas, I got married, yay, right? I became a mom. And I started my career, and things were going good. Everything, rosy and sunshine is out, and all of that was great for about 11 years. And after 11 years of marriage, I ended up getting a divorce, and I became a single mom. And this was devastating. Like if anyone has gone through a divorce or you know someone that has gone through a divorce, it is emotionally draining. And then you know what popped in my head, I don't want to be in poverty again. I don't want to be in poverty again. And I thought about that a lot. And I wanted to make sure that I was going to be okay. My daughter was going to be okay. So what I thought was a partner journey, with my family, now I had to do on my own. And I didn't know what things looked like. So, time goes on and it hurts less and less over time. You emotionally try to pull yourself together to where you're actually motivated to do something and to continue on. And, everybody has their own healing time. So I don't know if 2 years is average or whatever, but it was about 2 years till I finally asked myself that really big, scary question, like, what now? What do I like? What do I want to do? Because most of what I was doing was around the family, okay? So again, at 38, you guys, I was just waking up. 38. I just felt like I was so behind, and perhaps that was a little bit of my wind as well, the fact that I thought I was behind. I was constantly running so hard, trying to catch up with my peers, and, even though now it's okay to talk about the racial wealth gap and the income gap and all of that, back then it really wasn't. Like, you were the troublemaker if you brought it up. So I never really gave myself the credit or the grace to even think about that. So I had a big wake-up call in 2004. That was the time of my divorce. So this is the one big thing that I remember that I will never, ever forget during the time of my divorce. This was kind of what got me to get my finances together. So my husband had $100,000 more in his retirement account than I had in mine. We both worked for private companies, so it was a 401k. And we both made about the same money, got about the same match. I mean, it wasn't like he was a doctor and I was a teacher. We made about the same money. So with this disparity, here's what that looked like. 20,000, I'm thinking, yay, 38, 20,000, $20,000, I'm 38, I'm doing pretty good, yay. But he had $120,000. And this felt so, on top of everything else, this felt even worse. And I sensed, I became an investigator since then, so I sensed, sort of pieced it together. There was nothing nefarious going on. He worked for a bank, and one of the big three, and part of what was in his 401k was the company stock. And back in 2004, bank stocks did really, really good. So that was a part of it. He was invested in different things than I was. So over time, those 10 years, that gap and that difference, it added up. And it became quite a disparity. So I promised myself at that point that I would never be that financially vulnerable again. So that was my wake-up call. And we probably all have that where we're like, okay, this happened. We go cry in the corner for however long we need to. And then we come out and say, okay, what do I do now? And this was my point. And my answer was, when I asked myself, what do I like to do? I like money and finances and learning about how money work and credit and the stock market. I like that. I joined an investment club. So I started thinking about those things. What could I do? What steps could I take to make that change? And that's why I was so happy to come here today, because I feel like it's my duty to kind of share the things that I learned, because there was so much I didn't know. And, if I started at 38, maybe, you guys could start at 28, or you could look at your kids or your grandkids or your nieces, nephews, whoever the second generation is, to start helping them with some of these things. So the second part I call money moves, because this is after I woke up and I kind of knew what I was doing. I mean, early on, I was doing something. I was at least getting my company match. I'd always been told that. So I was doing the company match, but that's all I was investing in my retirement account. And I finally started, these are a few things. I started maxing out my 401k, my Roth IRA, and my HSA, which stands for Health Savings Account. So these did two things. They helped me save on taxes, or there was some extra tax benefit. They're called qualified accounts. The second one was that I had learned, mainly from my investment club and doing my own research, that you have to get your money growing for you. You can't just leave it in a bank account. I've got, old aunts, uncles, and grandmas that would, put it under their mattress, or they would save it in a bank account. So when I knew that having it invested and getting a tax advantage, that was like the double whammy. So I was really happy to do that when I figured that out. So then I hit what I call my financial independence number, my FI number. That is just 25 times your expenses. And later on, we're going to kind of step you through an example of how that works. But it's that simple. It's not your 25 times your income. It's 25 times your expenses. So everyone has probably heard of some variation of this, right? Live on less than you earn. Don't spend everything that you make. That's basically what that is. You take your expenses, which should be less than what you make, and you multiply it times 25, because that's what you're going to need when you decide to step away or you reach financial independence and so forth. So I could retire at that point. I was not ready to. And again, I got that poverty mindset. So I'm thinking I need a little bit more of a cushion than most people, because the last thing I would want is for anything to happen where, I'm living paycheck to paycheck again. So I worked 2 more years, and I started designing my life around FIRE and financial independence to retire early. So that big question is, okay, what do I want to do after? And I had that figured out probably about 3 or 4 years before I left, and probably even before then, when I didn't even know that it was possible. But I wanted to educate people on their money. I wanted to do stuff around financial literacy. I started working with a lot of high schools and colleges, and I figured out there's a lot of older people that don't know a lot of this stuff too. And plus, things change with technology. And I'm the nerd that loves to keep up with the latest and the greatest. So I'm always on it when it comes to that. I'm thinking, most people find this stuff boring. So if I can somehow package it up and convey the message in a way that's concise, where they don't have to do all the hard work, I'm happy to do it. I'll be the messenger. So that was 47. So finally at 49, that's when I handed in my FI letter, I had the big party, and I retired early. Now, before I could officially retire, I had to write the obligatory retirement letter, or some people would just call it an I quit letter, where you give your 2 weeks notice. So I had to do that. And I thought about it again and again. And it wasn't just a resignation letter, right? It was going to change the whole trajectory of my life, because I was no longer going to be working. I wasn't going to another job or anything. I was giving up the corporate paycheck, and I would be basically living off of my investments. So this was a really big deal for me. So would you guys like to see the letter? Okay, let's look at it. I was nice, and I'm an advocate of being nice and don't burn bridges. So I won't bore you with the whole letter, but I will give you just a snippet, and you'll have the essence of it. So I started out, I said, I know my 40s is a little early to be retiring, and some may even say I'm giving away the golden ticket. I certainly spent many months, maybe even years, imagining such a divergence from the norm. And I ultimately came to this conclusion. I could either follow a traditional path, or I could blaze my own. And I chose the latter. And luckily, I had a great boss that gave me a hug, and he wished me well. I mean, I gave him like a 4 months notice, so hopefully he would take it well. But so that was it. Then, like I said, I had the big get together. My daughter made those little candy bars, thank you gifts, and that was it. So I was ready to move on. So you guys want to see what's in my wallet? Show you those numbers? Okay, let's look at these. So let's first of all look at income and expenses. Again, $80,000 of gross income. Now I was in sales, so I had a portion that was variable commissions that I would get. So my base was probably about 60% of my pay, and 40% was kind of like variable. So in some places, $80,000, they would laugh at you. Like if you're in San Francisco or New York City, that's not much. But in Ohio, maybe parts of Georgia, that's pretty good. I mean, I felt good about that. And honestly, that was not my number one priority. My number one priority was my daughter. I was a single mom at this point, and I needed a good stable job where I didn't have to travel, and that did it. So if that meant that I was kind of right around that $80,000 mark versus 150, I was fine with that. And when I was learning about my finances, it kept me, I knew that I could do smarter things with the money I had and achieve the same results as, making more money. And I wasn't the best negotiator either with my salary, so that was probably part of it. So I had about $2,000 in other income, side hustle. We all got a little something on the side. Now, some people don't like to go into retirement with debt, but for me, I've gotten this down quite a bit, but that's my mortgage. My mortgage was such a low interest rate, I consciously decided to not pay that off and to pay it off as agreed. And you guys have to know yourself. I have to know myself. And I know that I'm going to continue letting that money work in the market and continue it being invested before, instead of paying it off. So that was something that I did that a lot of people kind of might do a little different. My annual expenses was about $45,000. And again, I hit my FI number. That was 25 times my expenses, not my income, but my expenses. And then I worked a little bit longer until I got to about 30 times my expenses. So the thing I want to highlight here, I kind of mentioned it before, but you see the gross amount was $80,000 that I was bringing in the 2000. But my annual expenses was a little over half of that. So I wasn't spending everything that I was making. Plus, some of the money that was going into my employee retirement accounts, it was pre-tax. That meant that it lowered my taxable income and I paid less in taxes. And the way I thought about it is I was rerouting money that I would be giving to the IRS and I was putting it into these investment accounts. That's how I saw it. So when I looked at it that way, it just made it make a lot more sense to me. So let's look at the savings and investing. And most of the money across all of my accounts was invested in just a low-cost index fund, usually a stock market index fund. And basically, an index fund, that's going to be a basket of stocks or any other investments. In my case, it was stocks. I had a few individual stocks, and those can be a little bit more risky, but I was very curious. And that's when I joined the investment club and I learned about stock analysis. So I do have a small portion in individual stocks, but the majority is just mutual fund, index fund, exchange traded funds. All those are pretty much the same thing. They're a basket of stocks, okay? And the most common, put that in there. Yeah, the most common is the S&P 500. Anybody ever heard of the S&P 500 somewhere? That is simply the 500 largest companies. That's your Coca-Cola, Home Depot, Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, all the really big companies in the US. And instead of investing in one of them, you've got 500. So your risk is spread across a whole bunch of different companies. So let's look at what I got saved here. So I had about a 40% savings rate, and you can just do the math from my income versus what my expenses were. I invested most of it. Of course, those pesky taxes were there, so I had to adjust for that. I maxed out my 401k. Now, this is 2019. I think the IRS limit for 401k, 401a, and all that is like $20,500 now. But at the time, it was $19,000. Now, I was getting what I called a really generous company match until I saw what Fulton County was giving. So my company was, if I put in 7%, they put in 9%. And they were one of the employers that cut out the pension, and then they gave you this enhanced 401k. So I jumped over to the enhanced 401k, and for the, if I put in 7, they put in 9. I thought it was very, very generous. They are now scaling back since I left, but Fulton County is even better than that. So I usually brag about this, but I don't know if I can do that today. So I maxed out my Roth IRA. That was $6,000 at the time, and I think it's still $6,000. So that didn't really change. But I did that. I maxed out my health savings account. This was a newer type of an account. My company started it back in 2008, but basically you have to be on a qualified high deductible health plan, and then they allow you to invest in a health savings account that's paired with it. So I started maxing, when I saw that I could invest in it, I started maxing it out right away. And I was doing the family. The family is just you and one other person. And so it was me and my daughter, And I was maxing it out every year. I was investing the money because me and my daughter was generally very low consumers of healthcare. So that plan worked great for us. You know, it may not work for you. You kind of have to look at your own situation, but that became a big piece. That grew pretty big. And let's see, and I mentioned the investment club and just some other after-tax investments. That would include things like if you use the Robinhood app, you know, that's just a regular taxable brokerage account, or you know, a Vanguard account where it's not a retirement account or anything like that. So I always like to try some of those things out. So there was a little bit in that, not a whole lot, as you can see. So I just wanted to point out that savings rate, that becomes really important. How much of what you're bringing in are you saving? So it doesn't even matter. Let's say if you made $500,000 a year. If you're spending $550,000 a year, you're still going to be broke, right? So how much you're keeping of your income really matters, and you would invest the difference. So you want to see my paycheck? So this is what the paycheck looked like. So this is every other week, and my take-home pay ended up being about 36% of this total paycheck. The next section is pre-tax deductions, and I'll come back to those in just a minute, but that was the biggest chunk, right? The last piece, because no pay statement picture is complete without taxes. So that was about 15%. And honestly, for what I was making, around $80,000, to only have a 15% tax rate, that's pretty low. But because I had pre-tax deductions coming out, it was lowering my taxable income. And that's why I say I feel like I was just rerouting money that would go to the IRS paying my taxes into some of my retirement accounts. So let's go back to those pre-tax deductions. Here's what those were. That dirt cheap health and dental insurance. That's one of the big things I miss from working from my regular job is the dirt cheap health insurance. But that was about $55 every pay period. And that was for me and my daughter. So that was pretty darn good. Then $270 in my health savings account. So like I said, I was maxing that out. And I did get a little bit of a match from my employer, not near what you guys did. I think it might have been $250, maybe $500 or something like that. And then the last one and the biggest one was my 401k. And for most people, their biggest pot of money they will ever have is in their employer-sponsored plan. So in your case, that would be the 401k. And why is that? Anybody have any idea why that ends up being most people's biggest pot of money? The main reason was 3 reasons really. Because it's automatic, it's made through payroll deduction. It is normally there's a company or an employer match. And then normally you have an easy short list of investments to choose from. And that's why for most people, that's where their biggest pot of investing money will be. And that's where most people start as well. I know that's where I started. So obviously saving all that money, that goes into my net worth. And your net worth is simply your assets, the things you own, like your retirement accounts, the equity in your home and things like that. And you subtract whatever debt you have. So I started tracking this, and you saw that money coming out of my 401k every pay period, right? So no surprise that the biggest chunk of money that's in my net worth is my 401k, over half. And then next is a traditional rollover IRA. That was actually, remember I told you I got divorced and he had a lot more than me. Luckily, there are federal provisions that we were married. Usually if you're married over 10 years, basically you take all the money that's in your retirement accounts, you split it down the middle. So I was able to get at least part of that. And then I let that money grow, and it's grown pretty good. So to the point where it's 15% of my net worth. And then there's my health savings account. Like I said, that's pretty big. Now, the market has been really crappy so far for the year, but my HSA had gotten up to like $180,000. And I started considering that another retirement account because I can use that for healthcare in retirement. It's still growing. I mean, I can take it some out now if I want to for qualified expenses, but I'm just letting it grow. And hopefully I'll continue to be healthy. Okay, so that didn't come up, but that was my Oh, that was my home equity. And then my Roth IRA, and then these other ones, put my car in there. Some people don't include their car. My home equity's on there. Some people don't include their home equity. One thing I don't include in my net worth was my daughter's 529. Luckily, she did not. She ended up not using all of it. And so I went back to school, got my master's, and used the rest of her 529, and I still had money in there. So in terms of generational wealth, I decided I have 11 nieces and nephews, and I threw out a challenge to them. I said, okay, whoever goes to college, can't be your first year because I don't want you dropping out and then my money's gone. But if you get to at least a year from graduation, I will give you $3,000 towards helping you with school, to give you a break, just to say, good job, keep going, invite me to your graduation. So far, I've had 4 of them that took me up on that offer. So that 529 is going a long way. And again, I'm thinking, how can I pay it forward? How can I create generational wealth? Not just with my daughter, she's good, but I've got 11 nieces and nephews and a whole bunch of other younger people that I'd love to try to have even a tiny bit of impact on. So that's the net worth, guys. Now, obviously, it didn't happen overnight, so I'm gonna kind of show you how that grew. So during my divorce, that was the first time I sort of did a net worth. I had to go back and recreate some of the early years, but wasn't so much. And as you can see, this is not a straight line, right? It's going up and down a little bit, and over time, I got to, when I started waking up at 38, that was in 2007. Got a little bumpy road there. And in 2017, that's when I reached my financial independence number. And 2 years later, I retired in December 2019. So this is kind of how it works. So as you can see, just a little, I was consistently contributing. And even though the market sometimes, like you can see 2008 is in there. 2008 was horrible. Like the market took an awful dive. The real estate, it's just everything in the economy had gone down and was broke. It was just an awful time. And that is right around the time I started investing. And luckily, I didn't get discouraged and I kept the money in the market because I knew the market doesn't just go up. So the most powerful thing I have ever done with my finances is doing this net worth statement, because it allowed me, is there anybody here that has worked for a different employer other than Fulton County before they came here? Okay, so there's a lot of you. So it was a chance for me to go back to some of my old employers. I had some small accounts that was just sitting there. And again, when I was younger, when it came to retirement, it just didn't seem like it was my money. It was so long. It was so long before I could touch it. Now I know better. You don't have to wait until you're 65 before you touch some of these funds. There's some provisions. So going through and pulling in all of these different accounts, all of these things that I had just thought about, they were all over the place, but bringing them together, it was kind of neat. I mean, I thought I might be in the red at that point. I wasn't. I was in the green, and I got to see progress. So if you guys want to do your net worth statement, it's okay if you're in the red. You're going to feel so good when you can look back and see that you've at least made progress. It's empowering. So I still had some questions after I retired. And frankly, today, I still don't have it all figured out. I'm still trying. I'm still a work in progress. But here are 3 big questions that I had. My first thing was like, where's my paycheck? Okay. So I'm going to give you a little bit more details about the 4% rule, but I basically use the 4% rule. And that just says that once you create enough of a nest egg, you should be able to take off about 4%. And this number's been debated. Some people think it should be 4.5. Some people think it should be 3.5 or 3. It's like whatever. But you decide kind of what that percentage is that you can take off of your investments every year to live on, and that money doesn't run out, and it lasts you for the rest of your life. So I did that 4% rule, remove 4% from my investments. It should last me forever, and my backstop. Now, I used to be so pessimistic about Social Security. I was like, it's not gonna be there when I get old. And when I finally started doing my research and working off of facts, I even went to like the Social Security Administration actuarial page to see what they had to say, because they do a lot of research around this. Well, it's not going away. The worst case is that they'd be able to pay out only 80% of benefits, which is still highly unlikely. There's been other moments in time where the Social Security was going broke, but now, but they've always fixed it because that program is way too important. So that's my backstop. So this 4%, even if I start drawing off of that, once I get, in the older years and I decide I want to take Social Security, that could easily be $1,000, $2,000 a month. All you need is 10 years to, get there. But that's my backstop, and that's something that is not going away. I've been pessimistic about it overly, and a lot of people think that it's not going to be there. So here's the other thing that bothered me. How do I take money out of my retirement account without a penalty? Because I remember on that first slide, I always said, okay, I can't get to my money until 59 and a half. Well, it turns out again, when I sit down and do my nerdy research, there's a bunch of ways. The first thing was like in 2020, and they say you got to get while the getting's good. My dad used to always say that. But in 2020, that was COVID, and they let you take money directly out of your IRA or your retirement account and not pay a penalty. I'm like, good, that's a godsend, for just that year, that's fine. I took advantage of that. No 10% penalty. Roth IRAs. Now, this is where you don't get a tax break in the beginning, but when you start to take out the money, including the growth, you never pay another penny on that money. But the thing that gets missed a lot that I think is that the contributions that you make to a Roth IRA, you can always take out those contributions tax and penalty free. So it can almost double as an emergency fund for some people. But it's kind of nice to know that, hey, even if you're putting money in this Roth IRA, if for some reason you need to take out those contributions, you don't have to pay a penalty on it. And you don't have to pay tax because you already paid taxes on it. I never, every time I would hear that explained, it was not clear to me that you could take your contributions out at any time. Okay, what else? My health savings account, no age limit on that. I could use that anytime, as long as it's for qualified health expenses. I had my regular stock investments. I had a little bit of my company stock. I sold all that off in the beginning. I had money in that investment club. So anything that, didn't get any kind of special treatment, I went ahead and, I started using that first. So 529, I took my daughter's 529, changed the beneficiary to me. And again, I didn't include that in my net worth because I know I was going to pretty much come close to depleting it or whatever, or share it with my nieces. So, that was another thing that I didn't have to worry about being 59 and a half. And then income from passion projects. I love financial literacy, and I've created my own little business around that because this is what I enjoy doing. I was very excited to get up this morning and meet with Ken and Virginia and see you guys. So this is what makes me smile. So I get to do this. All right, here was the big one, you guys, health insurance. I got spoiled. I don't know if any one of you guys feel spoiled, but I got spoiled on the dirt cheap health insurance at work. And I never thought about, especially when I was young, that my company was subsidizing so much. But boy, you find out when you apply for COBRA, because COBRA doesn't include the subsidy. So when I look at it, the plan that I was on, my company was paying 90% towards my premiums, and I was only paying 10%. I'm like, oh, we're gonna check that off the box real quick. So these are the things I considered. It was COBRA, Affordable Care Act, which is at healthcare.gov or Obamacare. And then the university I was going to, a lot of times they offer really cheap insurance because they have a really young, healthy pool of students, right? Now these last few, I didn't really consider them for myself, but I knew that they existed and I took a quick look, but they weren't gonna work for me. The health share and health share plan and the ministries, those aren't insurance, but a lot of people will put them in that bucket. They're not regulated like health insurance is. So I ended up choosing, after doing all my research, I ended up choosing the Affordable Care Act. In Ohio, they have a really good, they call it the exchange, a really good healthcare exchange using the ACA. And I also checked the states that I probably could possibly end up moving to, and that was Georgia. So Georgia has a really good plan, really good options. Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, and they all had very comparable plans to what I found in Ohio. So if you decide you're gonna leave work before you can, get Medicare at 65, you got to think about what are you going to do for health insurance. And if the ACA is your consideration, at least do your own homework, because those ACA plans and the exchanges are very state specific, and to a point they are county specific. But I was glad I did my research, because I was hearing some negative things and I was letting that sort of cloud my brain a little bit. And I finally said, you know what, let me sit down and do it myself. And turns out maybe they were in a state where they don't have such a good exchange, or maybe they were, speaking through a political lens. I don't know, but I always like to do my own research. So my really big thing here is that I had this really big dream of creating a financially literate society. So that was I wanted to make sure I was retiring to something and not running away. My boss was pretty good. I liked the people that I worked with. I liked my clients. I enjoyed what I did. But I knew that it wasn't something that really lit me up. I knew it wasn't my life's work. But financial literacy and education, I have just not only a special gift, but just a special curiosity about it. And to the point where I wanted to learn all these things, and I didn't mind reading, listening, watching YouTubes or whatever, to learn whatever I needed to learn. And then once I got it and fully understood it, I've even, gone to the IRS, directly to the IRS to read the code, and then I go somewhere where it was in English. But it gave me the ability to be able to easily explain this to other people, because there was a lot of times where I would hear someone explaining something and it just didn't make any sense. And I'm like, I want to try to cut through a lot of that, and a lot of times giving examples, scenarios, being willing to take a question really, really helps. So if I can be a part of that, I wanted to. And this is what I consider my life's work. So this is a big deal too. Now we're much older, we're done with high school, okay? But there is change happening. If you don't know much about investments and money and financial, personal finance, it's not your fault. This stuff is not taught in school. So high school students didn't get this, but now there's a big push. So anyone want to guess how many schools now require, this is as of June 2022, how many states require a personal finance class in order to graduate from high school? Anybody want to take a guess? Anybody? I see a one back there. What's that one, George? So this number is not high enough, I will say that, okay? But it is 13 states. And honestly, over the last year, there's been a lot of movement and several states that have this on the books where they're starting to implement it. Now, here are 12 of the states. It's Alabama, I just have them memorized, but it's Alabama, Florida, Iowa, Mississippi, Missouri, North Carolina, Nebraska, Ohio, Rhode Island, Tennessee, Utah, VA, or Virginia. I like to shout them out. Congrats for them for getting this implemented. Now, this is only 12. We just added a 13th state, and that 13th state is Georgia. So your kids, your grandkids, your nieces, your nephews, when they're going to high school now, they will be required to take a personal finance class before they graduate. And that is great news. I was so happy when I was organizing all this. I'm like, guess what? Georgia just passed it. I know they're just waiting on the governor to sign it. So this is encouraging, and we all know it should be 50, but it's progress at least. Let's see, what are these $2 bills for? So this $2, so like I said, early on when I started talking about financial literacy, I would work with a lot of high school and college kids, and it was a challenge to try to keep their attention and try to do something fun. So I started giving away $2 bills. If they would ask a question or if they would answer one of my questions, they would get a $2 bill. Most of them have never seen a $2 bill, but I explained to them why they were important to me, and I'll share that with you as well. So when I was in poor high school kid, growing up in poverty, and then in high school, still in poverty, all that time, I started saving $2 bills. I think I went to the bank one time and they gave me a $2 bill back. And for some, I was a waitress at Shoney's. That was my first job. I think I got it as a tip, and I thought it was special. So I held on to it. And from then on, if anybody remembers, back in the day, you had to go to the bank and deposit your paycheck. It wasn't just going in there by itself. So I would ask for a $2 bill. And all through high school, I kept saving these $2 bills. And then even through college, I kept saving those $2 bills. And even when I was an adult, I kept saving those $2 bills until my daughter, she was a teenager, maybe 14-ish or something like that. She's like, Mom, how many $2 bills do you have? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Let me count. I counted those up. I had 1,800 $2 bills, meaning that was $3,600. So I was shocked that I had that many $2 bills. And I'm like, I don't know if I need to keep saving them. But the one thing I thought about is looking back, even when I thought I was too poor, didn't have an extra penny to save, I saved those $2 bills. And I was starting to do it consistently. So if anything, it helped me build the habit of saving when I didn't even know it. And it was exercising that muscle. So as I made more, I started saving more. So that's my little reminder that no matter how small it is, you want to save something, even if you have debt. If you can save $5 a month, that's creating the habit. That's working on that muscle, and it's worth doing. So you're in habit forming mode at that point. If you don't have enough to save meaningful, you can at least start creating the habit. And I'm really glad that I did. So now what I do, I'm like, what am I going to do with all these $2 bills? So of course I couldn't just go put them back in the bank or go spend them at the store. So now I use those whenever I do financial literacy talks or presentation workshops or whatever. I give away the $2 bills for good questions, or if you want to answer my question. And we have $2 bills today, so we'll be giving out some $2. Ken has his personal stash of $2 bills because he did something similar. I'm like, I've never met anyone that has that many. Usually, someone has a story with $2 bills because they are considered to be lucky. If anyone's from Clemson or no Clemson, they stamp the $2 bills with the paw print and stuff like that. So yeah, this is just a story behind the $2 bill. They're very special to me, and I still have the stash, but I'm rapidly giving them away. Hopefully they'll inspire someone else. So I love to show this compound growth. So $50. We even got some $50 bills. So stay tuned, and we'll be giving a couple of those away too. But a lot of people ask me, what should I give my kid for graduation, or my grandkid, or some family member or friend that's not a consumerist gift? And for me, I stopped giving gifts a long time ago. They get a crisp new $50 bill, and then I give them this card. It says, "You're my millionaire. Did you know that all you had to do was save and invest $50 a week, and you could get to $1 million?" And then on the back of it, I give them a year-by-year schedule that shows them every single year how that money grows. So I'm giving them two gifts, right? The first gift is the money. They all want the money. And then the second gift is that knowledge of compound growth. And then I'll whisper to them, I'll say, normally it would take 40 years, but I know you're a superstar, so you could probably do it in 20. And it just builds them up. It makes them feel really good. And they probably can. I'll kind of show you what that looks like. But I get a lot of people, asking me for that card. Now these days, everybody uses Cash App or Venmo or Zelle. And so I just did a digital version. And the QR code does work. So if you want to use your camera phone there. But now I will normally just send them a text message with this card as an attachment. It's just a image file in my pictures. I'll send them that. And I'll say, yeah, take a look at this. $50 is on the way. So now I do it digitally. But, we're trying to inspire a whole generation here. And some of these people, they're not even related to me. But if you send me a graduation invitation, you're going to get a $50 bill and this message. So here is the behind the scenes of how I got there. I didn't just pull it out of thin air. So if you do $50 a week, you invest in the stock market, you get about a 9% growth, and I mentioned that S&P 500, right? Those are the 500 largest companies, or Coca-Cola, Home Depot, Google, Apple, all of those. And then you do it over 40 years, you'll get to $1 million. And they can pull out their calculator app, their time value of money app, and confirm. So I whisper to that, anyone else that I'm giving this to, and I'll say, you know what, you can probably do it in 20 years. And here's what 20 years looks like. Now, obviously, you're going to have to save and invest more than $50 a week, right? So I'm assuming a $60,000 salary. That is the average household income in America. Now, obviously, over time, it depends on, how much experience you have and things like that. But this is a good number to start with, okay? So if you're at Fulton County and you're doing your 401A and your 457B, you'd have to do 20%, save 20% of that. You get your company match, which is about 10%, 8%, 2%, and you'll get to $18,000 a year. That's what you putting in 20% and getting your match. I use the same growth, 9%. You get there in 20 years. So you already cut your time in half right there. And again, you'll pay less in taxes if you're using the pre-tax portion. So that's pretty darn good. Now again, for anybody that doesn't trust me, there's a bunch of calculators out there where you can do, net worth calculators, or in this case, this is a compound growth calculator. And I did 3 different returns. So at the top, told me, hey, after 20 years, you'll be at $1 million. And I made 3 assumptions. I did 9% of course, then I did a little bit lower than that at 6%, and then I did a little bit more than that at 12%. So you can see, based on what you think the return, you might say, Jackie, that 9%, where I don't know if I can get that, that's too aggressive. Some people might say, oh no, I think I can get a little bit more, it should be 10% or 11%. So just wanted to show you that, and then that's to that calculator. But they're everywhere, that's just one. All right, remember I mentioned that Social Security going broke? I really, really just want to share the research that I did around this to convince people that it's not as pessimistic as it used to be. I used to be very, very pessimistic, but is Social Security going away? Is it going broke? That is just a myth. And this is my official research. Basically, according to the actuaries, yes, the trust fund is scheduled to round out in 2034. Now, the trust fund is like an emergency fund. So it's not like it won't have anything because you still have workers paying into the system, right? But they're saying by 2034, if nothing is done, then they're projected to only pay 20%. Now, that can be easily fixed. All Congress has to do is either raise taxes, cut benefits, or make other adjustments. And with these things, it could be just on the margin. Just very, very tiny little things. But historically, when they've done this, they always do things in the 11th hour, right? They're not, it's 2034, they ain't doing nothing now. They may do something in 2033 in 6 months, but they're not going to do anything this far out. Now, the way that you probably heard, the way that you calculate Social Security is you take the highest 35 years of earnings, and that is true, right? But I retired super early, so I was a little afraid that I may be shooting myself in the foot when it came to Social Security. But I'm doing my research, and all you need is 10 years to qualify. So it might not be as much as it would be if I worked the full 35 years, but you'll get something. So if you work at least 10 years full time, more than likely, you'll probably end up with about $1,000 a month in benefits. And that's for the rest of your life. It's adjusted for inflation. It's secure passive income. It's like the securest income you can get is backed by the federal government who can print money. So it's inflation adjusted, secure passive income, and you get it for the rest of your life. So that's a nice backstop. So if anyone is like on the bubble, not knowing when they should retire, make sure you take a look at your Social Security. Now again, the 35 years of indexed earnings, and it's that great backstop. So I gave you generally how it's calculated. All you have to do is go to ssa.gov and you can sign on, create an account, and it will show you what your projected benefits are. So you don't even have to guess. You don't necessarily have to know the formula. I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of how it works. So there you go, the QR code is live. So create an account, and that might make you feel a whole lot better. We paid into that system all our lives. You deserve to get something back. So what's your superpower? So all this hard financial stuff is good and all, but we have to think about, how we feel, what we're good at. We want to be happy with what we're doing when we retire. So all these things could be your superpower, right? There's a whole bunch of things here. And even more. And even mindset, to me, is one of the really big ones. But we can't do everything good, right? We're not going to, hit on all cylinders. So if you try to do all the things that people talk about in terms of being successful, reaching financial independence, being able to retire early or retire at your normal retirement age, your mind is gonna get cluttered and you're probably not gonna be very successful. It's gonna be just as cluttered like the screen is right now, right? So think about your superpower. What are you good at? And I had to think about that. Coming out of my divorce, this is something that I'm thinking about. So I came up with these few things. So mindset was huge for me. Emotion, psychology, part of my master's degree that I just got, it's around financial therapy and behavioral finance, because I knew there was such a big connection to what we did and actually how we felt, our relationships, our history, how we were socialized. So these are things I was good at, but think about, what are you good at? How do I clear the slate and focus on the things I'm good at and not the things that I'm not so good at? So just the general big picture, and you guys probably already kind of figured it out. There's some things you want to decrease, right? We want to decrease debt, taxes, and our expenses. And that's going to look different for everybody. Everybody probably does some form of budget. I'll give you some apps that you can use, or you can do it on a simple yellow notepad, right? Now, there's some things we want to do more of, right? We want to increase. We want to increase savings, investing, and earnings. And so the bigger that gap is, right, you're reducing the things that, are negative, things you don't, you want to minimize, and you're increasing those other things. That gap is growing. As that gap grows, that's what's going to get you to that financial independence. Now, I hope that some of that made sense and that it maybe gets you thinking a little bit. So we're going to move into a little bit of discussion with Ken. But before I do that, is there any questions, anything that wasn't clear, or we got some $2 bills up here, okay? So, so if anybody has a question or any clarification on anything that I covered with my numbers, I'm happy to answer it anytime, throughout this morning. And they've got the mic, so if you do, let us know. But we'll go ahead and move into Ken, the Fulton County stuff.
Virginia, do you have anything in the chat for any chats? All right.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead, all right. So hoping I did okay there. So Fulton gets financially fit. So I understand that you guys are gonna have a lot of different topics around your things that relate to finances. Honestly, almost everything in our lives touches finances and money. So I just really wanted to put this in the context of a Fulton County employee. So I like to nerd out on this stuff. So I looked at your 401A, your 457B, the HSA, the FS, a lot of the company benefits, okay? And I thought my benefits were pretty good, and what Fulton County does was way better than what I had. So, do you know your numbers? That's a good starting point. And when you think about, your wins, it could be as simple as sitting down and knowing some of these numbers. You don't even have to do anything about it right away. Just sort of, a little awareness of like where you're at. So that big number, like I said, the most important exercise I've done around my finances was doing a net worth statement. Now I was using a spreadsheet. Some people, there's plenty of apps and things like that, but I felt really powerful when I knew my net worth. So doing a net worth statement. Credit score. Anybody check their credit score lately? Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So the target for a credit score, a good credit score, is about 720, and that number will probably give you the best rates. If you've got higher than that, that's great, but probably you're not going to get much more than the person that has 720. But if you keep it above that, and if you have trouble with your credit, don't be afraid to check it. Like if you go to apply for a loan or get credit, they're going to check it. But now that it's widely available for free for almost everyone, annualcreditreport.com. That's the only website to go to get your official report. But there's a lot of places to get your credit score for free. Credit Karma, a lot of credit cards will put it right on your statement every single month. So you should know your credit score, and I wouldn't really pay anything to get that. There's so many ways to get it for free. If you're applying for something big like a mortgage, maybe at that point you want to get all three. But It's very easy to check that, and you would want to know that number. Then your savings rate. I mean, you saw mine was 40%. It wasn't always 40%. Like when I was married and I only had that $20,000 in there, I was just doing the match, and I think the match was like, our match was like 6%, and that was it. So you want to know that. And this includes your investing in retirement. So whatever you're putting in your 401A and your 457, that would count towards your savings rate. Even your employer, what Fulton County is putting in for you, count that as part of your savings rate. So when you think about that, you can easily get to that 10 to 20%, right? So debt to income ratio. So we know, there's plenty of debt that's around between mortgage, credit card debt, student loans, the big thing. If you went to college and had to take out loans, that could take decades to pay off. So know how much you have going towards your debt, and in relation to your income. That's what that debt to income is. And then the last one here is your emergency fund. So like I said, I was saving those $2 bills when I thought I couldn't save anything. So get a little bit of a emergency fund going, because the last thing you want to happen is you blow out a tire, and now you need to pay $200 to get a tire, or whatever else could happen. Protect yourself there if you're just getting started. Ideally, you want to be at 3 to 6 months of an emergency fund, 3 to 6 months worth of expenses, not necessarily your income. So you want to get there, but remember, we're a nation of multitaskers. So even if you have debt, save a little something to simply create the habit, even if it's like $5 a month. Okay, just get used to that, the automation of it. So what else we got here, Ken? So fine numbers. So these are a little bit more aggressive. So I'm not saying that you have to do these, but I know some people have aspirations of retiring way before the 59 or the 62 or some of those other numbers, okay? So these are some more aggressive things here. So your 5 numbers I mentioned, 25 times your expenses. So if you want to do that, that's easy math. You probably have to know what your budget is to be able to see, what your expenses look like. Start with the big 3, your transportation, housing, and food. And that'll get you started. And again, the win is if you just sat down and figured out what your expenses were. Congratulate yourself on that. Have a drink. All right. Then you want to know your expenses, and that is an annual amount. Your savings rate. The target, I would say, if you want to try to retire early, is about 40%. But remember, that includes your employer match. It includes what you're contributing to your 401A and your 457B and all of that. Now, again, this is sort of the aggressive route, doing it early. Then you got your debt. I never say, debt becomes a very mental thing, and we all have our different preferences. Some people just do not have debt. It keeps them up at night. And if that's the case, then you may not want to have any debt. But if you do decide to have debt, just be conscious about it. Know that you want to get it to the low interest debts. And also, if anyone has student loans, or if you have kids, we're talking not just about us, but we're talking about generations, right? So if you've got student loan debt, there are income-driven repayment plans that, especially you guys work for a qualified employer for what's called a public service loan forgiveness. And all you have to do in that program, it's an income-driven program, but you pay 120 one-time payments, which comes to about 10 years. After 10 years, they forgive the rest. It doesn't matter if you had $200,000 worth of loans. If you consistently pay on this income-driven, and after 10 years, it's forgiven. And you don't even have to pay taxes on the forgiven portion. So that's a pretty good deal. Then I call this a transition fund only because what if you just want to take a break from working at all? Maybe you want to go walk the El Camino. Maybe you want to take time off with your grandkids. Maybe you want to just take a breather from doing anything that's connected to a job. Give yourself a couple years. Create your own sabbatical. Some companies, some employers have sabbaticals, but if you don't, you can create your own. And just to say, I think maybe I want to try a business or something like that. So build that up a little bit more so you have that walk away money, right? And you're not going to go in the poorhouse doing it. Just want to kind of give you the Roth versus traditional. This is pretty simple, and you guys already know this, but basically you're going to either be taxed now or later. When you do a Roth, you're going to be taxed now, Your tax as it's going in, but there's no tax when you withdraw the money. And the traditional is the opposite. No tax going in, tax-free, lowers your taxable income, but going out, you are gonna pay taxes. You're gonna pay one way or the other. Okay, and then, as I mentioned, this 4% rule, I kind of stepped through that, but here's an example. The example that I did was $40,000, okay? So, if you had $40,000 in annual expenses, you would multiply that times 25. And that would get you to $1 million. That's your nest egg, that's the amount that you need, so that on the back end, you would take out 4%, which is $40,000 every year, and it should last you the rest of your life. Now, my little note here is that, remember, if you have other income, let's say you're retired, you need $40,000 a year to live off of. If you got Social Security coming in there, then you don't need $40,000. You deduct whatever you got coming in. Maybe you have rental property. Maybe you have something else that is coming in. So that all of a sudden says, I live off of $40,000 or whatever the number is, but I only need $20,000 from other sources, or $20,000 to pull off my investments because I got, a little bit of this pension coming in. I got a little bit of, rental income coming in. I got a little bit of Social Security coming in. So this sort of is a relief valve, having some of these other resources. So here's some quick wins for you guys. And again, I nerded out on this, but you have a company match. Not every company provides a match, especially smaller companies. They might not get a match. A lot of them don't even have a 401k, so it's up to employees to save on their own outside the company. So you got that. That's a quick win. Then we got something called the Savers Credit. Anybody heard of the Savers Credit before? Here's what that is, and it may not so much apply to you depending on your income, but think about the next generation. Younger kids that's not making a whole lot starting out. I put an asterisk by that because it is income qualified. So, or you can only make so much to qualify for this, but basically, they will give you a tax credit for a portion of what you put in your retirement account. And I think it's around $30-something thousand for individual, and then maybe double that. The IRS changes the numbers each year, it's adjusted for inflation. But when someone's just starting out, and if they manage to save something, it's nice to know that they actually get some of it back. It's kind of a nice little incentive. So it's designed for people that are lower to middle income. But that's something I don't hear talked about a lot. Then Fulton County contributes to your FSA, which is a flexible spending account. And then your HSA, just depending on what type of health insurance you have. The HSA, the health savings account, I think it's $750 for individual and $1,500 for family. See, I know that better than you can. But it's because it was so good. My company wasn't even doing anything that good. And then, like I said, for you guys that worked somewhere else before, did you have a retirement account there? They might not let you take it with you, and it could still be sitting there, but a lot of provisions have changed. My company used to not let you take your pension when you left with you until you were like 60, but now they'll let anybody roll it over to an IRA. So don't forget about that money if you work somewhere else. Normally, if you work there a lot of them started right away, so you could have something with them. Usually if it's more than $5,000, like if it's a 401k or something like that, the account is still there. If it's less than $5,000, I think they can cash it out and they'll just send you a check. So those are some quick wins. Now here's some quick wins with expenses. And these are just, I'm not the cut out the latte girl. So I'm not about cutting a budget, worrying about a cup of coffee. Now you can, if that's your thing, or a coupon clip, all those are helpful. But I'm looking for big hits that's gonna make a difference. So, I have aunts and uncles, they'll brag about the fact that, I've been with this insurance company for 40 years. And a lot of times, the longer you stay, the more you pay. So I found that every time I shop my insurance, I always get it lower. So if you can save $500 a year just by calling a different insurance company that's, rated good and everything, why not? You can save and you're not gonna feel hurt. Then things that you pay for monthly, cell phone service, cost has gone down, much more competitive. Streaming services, the same thing, the internet. So if you've just been taking their annual increase every year, call them up and say, hey, I used to pay $40 for this and now I'm paying $85. I need to see if you got anything else because otherwise I'm gonna have to switch. they will immediately get a retention person on the line and they will reduce it. And it's not just for that month, it'll be reduced going forward. So that could save you a lot of money. Then the earned income of the child tax credit. Now again, if this doesn't directly impact you, look at your kids, look at your grandkids, nieces and nephews, or anybody else. This is a nice little additional credit to have. And last year with, I think it was called the American Rescue Plan that Biden did, that significantly increased the child tax credit and the earned income credit. So this could be a nice boost, just knowing those little credit things. Then the student loan pause, boy, they kept extending that through COVID, but now it's extended through August. I'm kind of connected with that community and it could be extended again. We'll see, nobody knows for sure because when they extend them like literally 2 weeks before they're supposed to turn it back on. But they have not done much of anything to prepare for that. And it's a big, nasty job. And my last one is public service loan forgiveness. This is a big deal. This is a waiver that they put into place. So just a quick little history on public service loan forgiveness. If you work for a qualified employer, and Fulton County is a qualified employer, also most hospitals, schools, federal, state, and local government, okay? So when they first started this program, it's back in 2007. So you paid 10 years on time payments and the rest is forgiven. So in 2017, the first people, mostly teachers, came forward and said, oh, I think I've made these 120 payments. And they had about a 90% rejection rate, right? It was in the headlines every day, you know, this public service loan forgiveness is not working, they're rejecting people, and it was a holy mess, it really was. So finally, at late last year, they said, okay, we know we messed up. We know it's screwed up. We're going to give you a waiver. Like people were on the wrong repayment plan, they had the wrong loans, and there was not a lot of communication. So they said, okay, what we're gonna do is we're gonna allow you to get back on the right type of plan, the right payment plan, and we will count all those payments that you made. And there are people every day where I see, they say, I did this, I had my employer, which in your case would be Fulton County, had my employer to fill out this employer confirmation form to say that you work for them. They turned that in, they got credit for their payments, and I've seen 45,000, 120,000. So you talk about a quick win, that could be good. So if you know anyone with student loans, anyone that works for Fulton County is a qualified employer, or anyone else that you think works for government, nonprofit, or whatever, they need to take advantage of this waiver. That is only good until October, Halloween, October 31st. So they may extend it, but at this point, it's like, get yours. And this is a really, really good, I think this program is way bigger than they ever thought it would be. But you can do a quick win and get rid of a lot of debt that way. So here's some things that overlooked, and most of you already mentioned, your Roth contributions that you made, there, you can take that out at any time, no age limit, no penalty, no fee. You can invest your HSA funds. A lot of people don't know that. So make sure you, if you invest in your HSA, or if you have an HSA, decide if it's right for you to invest. It might not be right for everyone, but for me, I was able to cash flow our expenses. So I'll mention I-bonds. For anyone that is a little more risk averse and they like safety and security, I have not thought a lot about I-bonds, but you see them everywhere now, people talking about them. It's because they're paying 9.6%. Remember my assumptions for the stock market, that was 9%. But now you got I-bonds paying 9.62%, and the principal you put in is guaranteed. So that's pretty good. So that's something that is looking really good right now. Historically, maybe not always, but you're not going to lose any money, one. And then two, it's paying 9%. The rate gets changed every 6 months. You can only buy those through Treasury Direct, and you can only do $10,000 a year. So it's not huge, but it's an option. Let's see, what else we got here? We've got the Social Security thing. If you work 10 years full time, you probably qualify for about $1,000 in benefits. So keep that in mind. 35 years is better, right? But don't feel like you're missing out on a whole lot if you cut out early. Go look at your statement and you can kind of see. Then the insurances, life insurance, disability, I believe Fulton County has some help with that. but a lot of people forget about this. We're actually more likely to become disabled than we are to die, in our younger years. And then this is a big one. I know you guys are going to have a little education session on probate. So if you name beneficiaries of all of your accounts, you can avoid probate. This is the easy, low-hanging fruit. You just go online, you change your beneficiary. If you got divorced, if you got married, anything, make sure you change your beneficiary. And not just on the retirement account. Your HSA, you need to name a beneficiary on that because there's money in that account. Bank accounts, you can name a beneficiary on your bank accounts. They refer to that as payable on death, so POD is how it's usually done, but you can name a person. What else is on there? And then Treasury Direct, they have a really wonky way of naming a beneficiary, but you can. Anything that you could possibly put a beneficiary on is better because it doesn't go through probate. When it goes through probate, that's a public process, so everybody can see it, it's public record. But if you name a beneficiary, that's gonna go directly to the person that you name, and it's private. So that's the best option, and it's free and easy. Probate is gonna cost you, and it's timely as well. Okay, so in what order? So went over all these accounts, all these different things. So let's try to say, okay, Jackie, if I want to get started, what should I do first? Okay, I would say get your emergency fund, like at least $1,000 or something in case something crazy happens. I don't want you to be, completely, thrown back. The second one would be get your match. The 6% is mandatory, but then you can gain some additional money. Did I get that right? 8% plus 2%? For the match? Okay, I want to make sure I did that right. Okay, there you go. That's what I made sure of. Then you get contributions to your HSA, FSA may be up there too. And then you go to your traditional Roth to the maximum. That's only $6,000. If you're over 50, it's $7,000. And I mentioned the Roth or the traditional IRA. Those are individual retirement accounts, so they're not tied to a job. Slightly different provisions. So that gives you a little more, diversity, with your money. So this is the order I would do these, pretty strictly, okay? Now these other ones might be a little more flexible, okay? So I would say you got the match, did your traditional IRA or Roth, you did your HSA. I would go back and if you can max out your 401A and your 457B. Why? Because those are tax advantaged. And you want to try to, and in my mind, I was trying to make sure I got all the tax advantage money first. And then those I-bonds could be, if you still got money and you're like, Jackie, I can save more. The I-bonds is a good option. You can't get money much safer than that. And a regular brokerage account, like, if you have a Robinhood app or a regular broker or whatever, it's not a retirement account, so it doesn't have that special treatment, no age limit or anything like that. And then if you have kids or yourself thinking about college, maybe a 529. Again, those last few, they're kind of flexible depending on what you got going on. But the match is probably the biggest thing that you want to do first and having that emergency fund. And you can do both of those together because I wouldn't want you to give up that match. Okay? So let's add all of it up. So I love examples, so we're going to run an example here. $60,000 is what I like to use. So if you make $6,000 and you get the Fulton County match, that's 8% plus 2%, that's $6,000, right? So the part you put in, if you just go up to the match, it comes to $4,800. So the company is putting in more than you're putting in, right? And that all adds up to $10,800 a year. So just by doing the match, if you're at 60, adjust it for whatever your salary is, right? It's going to be, if you make around $60,000, you're at $10,800 a year. So let's see how that works. Let's take it a step further. So we're going to look at 5 years, 15 years, and 25 years. So in 5 years, let's say you got that vesting schedule. So let's say you stayed long enough to be fully vested. Right? So if you're fully vested, you can walk away with $64,000. And I just assumed that 9%, if you want to do lower, you can. But after 5 years, you've already got plenty of money. Like I said, one of my mental blocks was the fact that when I was younger, was that putting money in my retirement account, it didn't feel like my money. It felt too far away. But even after 5 years, you're in a pretty good spot. So let's look at 15 years. That's $317,000 just after 15 years. And I know we got some people who've been here over 25 years. Anybody? Yeah. So we got some people here over 25 years. So that's almost $1 million just doing the match. So that's where that time of your money being in the market, that compound growth that grows over time. So there you go, just putting in the match. This is where your money would grow to. So once you do retire, we're finally there. And this doesn't matter if you are retiring early or retiring at your normal retirement age. But here's where your income will come from, right? You can take money out of your 457B. And there's no age limit for that, right? Yeah, you don't have to be 59 and a half. So, that's a big difference in the 457 and the 401A. And then you've got your 401A or your Roth 401A if you decide to do that. And there's a nice little provision for employer-sponsored plans only. If you leave after your age 55 or the year you turn 55 or later, you can take money out of your 401A and you will not get penalized for it. You won't have to pay that 10% penalty. That's only for an employer plan. Now, it doesn't work for an IRA or anything else. That's only through an employer plan. That's called the rule of 55. So if you want to cut out 55, you can get to your money just like if you were 59 and a half with, your other accounts. So then you've got your IRA, and I mentioned traditional Roth, and then so with the IRA, as you're taking the money out, if it's Roth, you're not going to pay the taxes when you take it out, right? If it's traditional, you are going to pay taxes because you didn't pay taxes on the front end. And then your health savings account, you don't even have to be a certain age to get that out. It just has to be for qualified medical expenses. And the last piece here is Social Security. We talked about that. The myth is it's not completely going away. And then for those that have a pension, I put a question mark by that because I know the pension was stopped and so many companies are doing that. There's very few employers that offer a pension anymore. My company stopped it back in 2008, so that happens. But if you still have a pension, you can count that in there too. So this is where your income will be coming from once you do retire, whether it's early or on a normal time. Okay. So let's see what's next. I just wanted to leave you guys with a few tips, if you don't mind. Just to wrap it all together, here's what we got, Fulton County. So celebrate your wins. You guys are probably already doing a lot of things really great. You've got a great employer, you're getting a match, you're getting dirt cheap health insurance. And there's probably a bunch of other things that you can think of that you're like, okay, I know my credit score, that's good. So celebrate yourself for that because when you don't have it, it feels a lot worse than when you do. If you got a low credit score, that's very stressful and that keeps people up at night. So when you have it, it's good to have, but we kind of take it for granted. So just celebrate your wins. And then take advantage of the free money and the other benefits at work. You guys have an employer where you do get generous benefits. One thing I've always said about government is that their benefits is way better than most private companies, so that's nice to have. Okay, this is very tactical, but figure out your net worth and your FIRE number. That's 25 times your expenses. I got 3 calculators there. I showed you one. We're actually going to play with another one, but there's a whole bunch. If you just Google, retirement calculator, compound growth calculator, you can put in certain assumptions and you can use your own number. If you say, 9% is way too aggressive, or I think you should do more than 9%, you can change it to whatever you want to get together what works for you and what's realistic. Evaluate your debt, your expenses, your cash flow. You don't have to do all this at once, and some of these things you may already have going on and you might already have them done, but maybe do one thing at a time and just kind of pause and say, wow, I didn't know what that number was, and now I do. Okay, I'll revisit this and see how I want it to look going forward in a couple of weeks or a couple of months or whatever. But these are powerful things to take a look at. And then anyone that has a student loan debt, please look at that public service loan forgiveness. You could have a lot of your debt forgiven. That program is awesome. And then lastly, just begin planning what your financial independence and retirement goals look like. Only you can define those. You and your family, you and your spouse. And you know what? It might not even hurt if you wanted to do this with your kids, part of this, especially if they're little, they're sponges and they're so curious. If they want to come around while you're doing some of this, let them sit in. They're not going to understand it all, but, they'll remember. I sat at the table with my mom and she was saying she was doing something called FIRE. What's that? So yeah, I was doing that with my daughter and I'm at 26 now. I'm shocked at how much she picked up that I had no idea that she was even paying attention. So you'd be surprised. So if for anyone that likes to use apps or want to get this stuff done, in the new age, digitally, here are probably the top personal finance apps. They'll help you with your net worth. They'll help you aggregate your accounts and come up with your whole debt assessment. They will help you with budgeting, bills. Some of them have credit scores, but these are the 4 main ones that I hear about. And then I get asked a lot, Jackie, when you started learning about, personal finance and retiring early, reaching financial independence, who did you listen to or what was helpful to you? So this is just a single page of, some of the people I want to give honor to that have influenced me. They put out great content. I've learned a lot from them. Some of them have even become close personal friends through my journey. And so I would say, just think about how you learn the best. Like when I was in school, you always had to read stuff, right? And, if I was interested in something, people say, read this, read that, read this book. And it's like, I'm not really a reader like that. I don't really read. That's not how I digest information and retain information the best. So I learned that I'm a auditory and a visual learner. So I like to listen to podcasts. So if I want to know something on a topic, or I want to learn about it, I'm going to go to my Apple Podcast app and I'm going to try to pull up the topic. Or I'm a visual learner. So I like YouTube. I like video. So I'm going to do that. And it's just not, I'll read maybe a blog or something like that. But if I could get an audiobook, I'll get an audiobook. So figure out what is the best way that you learn and retain information and go from there. But there are a ton of great content creators that talk about personal finance, and you will find which ones interest you, which ones you can understand, which ones that make the most sense for you. So you'll come up with your whole list of this as well. And I'd love to keep in touch with you guys. This QR code is just all of my contact information and social channels and just other things that I've done. I'd love to keep in touch. And that kind of does it, but we have time for some questions. Now, like I mentioned, we got some $2 bills and we got possibly 1 or 2 $50 bills so that you can start getting to your $1 million. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Ken.
All right. Well, first of all, have a drink of water.
I know.
You have me thirsty. Thinking all of the information that you were sharing with the group. So first of all, I want to give you a round of applause. Thank you very much for sharing your journey. And funny thing, if you want to go back one slide, because she had no idea that about this, but so the first exposure to FIRE for me was the Rich Journey folks. We first attempted to get them to come work with us, but they all were over in Spain enjoying their early retirement. Right? Yeah, Portugal. And I don't think they wanted to fly all the way back during COVID to have conversations. So we're not going to get them. But the Sounders, they're going to be the next set of the individuals come to talk to us because I want to give you guys a full spectrum of artists. Single mom,
and they live in Atlanta.
And they live in Smyrna. Specifically.
Okay, I didn't know if they lived in Fulton County or not, so but I knew they lived in
We're not going to hold it against them. We're not going to hold it
against
them. But they're going to be our next set of speakers to come and talk about their journey of how, a young married couple in Atlanta was able to make the same fire journey and the things that they did. So, this was a great, pre-advertisement for their speaking engagement that they have in Fulton County. So again, thank you very much for that precursor. Any questions from the audience? This is not the time to be shy. We are breaking down walls relative to finances. There's no incorrect question. Hopefully, there's no incorrect answer as well. But I think if we could start getting comfortable about talking about finances, and I'll ask the first question, and hopefully this generates some feedback from the audience. So, if as they leave this room today, and I think you kind of had it on one of the previous slides, what are they supposed to do today? What are they supposed to do this week? And what should they do within a month?
Okay, so we're asking for today. We're asking for 1 week and 1 month.
Yes.
Okay, so if I had to say anything today, it would be about awareness. If you don't have access, log on to or create an ID and password for your 401A and your 457B if you have it. If you don't have a 457B, see how you can sign up for that, because that's free money there. Okay, so I would say that would be a today thing. And in a week, I would say, just see where you're at. Numbers, if I put in some of those slides, the numbers that you would want to know, that's going to help you with your goals. Which of those numbers that you have no idea about, just pick one of them. Just one of them and say, I don't know my credit score. I would like to know what it is, and I would like to check my credit report. When it comes to a credit score, the biggest part is on-time payments. And some people think if they miss a few payments, their credit score is so low it's not worth looking at. That's not true. There's mistakes all over that credit report, and only you care about that. So you would dispute them or whatever. So whatever number that was up there that you didn't know as we were talking about it, maybe take a look at that. Your expenses, maybe looking at your debt, aggregating that. We're doing your net worth or your fire number. So the net worth and the fire number, to me, those are a little bit bigger, so I'll probably put that in the month. I'll put that in the month category. In the meantime, you could start to say, let me jot down my former employers. I'm gonna start calling these bad boys and seeing who still has money in my name. Because the worst part is, like, if you pass away, and we've all had someone in our family, elderly relative or whatever, that have passed away, and the person that was in charge of everything, whether it was a spouse, the kids, or whatever, they're scrounging to figure out what this person had with their different past employers and things like that, because you don't want to leave any money on the table. So you can do that yourself. And I guess one of the other things, for today, name your beneficiaries. These days, you can do that online, and you can change it anytime you want. And that's just going to keep it where if something all of a sudden happened to you, you already have that taken care of. And that's one thing you can easily check off, goes to the side until, there's a reason for you to change it again. So I think those would be my favorite.
And I would stress the beneficiaries, because I remember my former role in the Virgin Islands. One of my most heartbreaking situations was a young lady got divorced. A young lady got divorced from her spouse, got remarried, never changed the retirement beneficiary, unfortunately passed away, and the former spouse was able to come in and claim her entire pension because she never changed or updated the beneficiary, which left her current husband in a lurch. Now, not knowing how they resolved it through probate or whatever the case may be, but because of that, it's like out of sight, out of mind. It's out there in another world. So I always stress, update your beneficiaries. My sister, who was a probate, who specialized in probate, always talked about that, and having your affairs in order. No one likes to write a will. You put it on paper, it's gonna happen. That's been our cultural thing for many years. But if you put it on paper, what you want will happen. Versus it will happen. Well, it will happen eventually, no matter what. But at least you have it documented from that. Any questions from you guys? You want to welcome to the. Okay. Ask your question, and then I'll go back and I'll paraphrase it as best as I could.
Okay, my question is about the student loan repayment. This question came to me several times and I never knew what the answer is. We have employees who call, from Board of Health, who actually, once it left government, whether they went to a private employer, returned back to government, was laid off, but they still end up with the state, which is a qualifying employer. Their question to me was, if they're, the 10 years that they're supposed to make those payments, if does it pick up from where they left off? How does that work?
Okay, I will repeat the question. So she's asking about the public service loan forgiveness that we talked about. And you had an employee that used to work for a government agency. They left, they went to a private employer that was not a qualified employer, but they subsequently came back to a qualified employer, government agency. Okay, so does that continue or does it stop? Is she no longer eligible? Does she start over? That's a great question. And this is why there's so much confusion around that program. It does not have to be consecutive. It just needs to be 120 payments. So obviously they did not get credit for working for that private employer. So she still wants to get certification from those employers that she got her how many ever years she worked there, how many ever payments. Now, she did need to be on an income-driven repayment plan, but the waiver excuses that even. So those payments will get counted as long as she was with a qualified employer. And so she wants to get with her loan servicer, which I think there was one particular provider that was doing that. Maybe there's two now that was handling the public service loan forgiveness. So she wants to go ahead and get those processed in the system. When she logs onto her account, I want her to be able to see how many months she has in and don't let them sit there, because to me, people could change or systems change and things like that. So her task right now would be go back to every employer that's a qualified employer, have the employee certification form filled out, turned in to the loan servicer so that she can see how many that's done. And possibly she could already be at 120 payments. And if she is, guess what happened? She gets the rest of the loan forgiven, don't have to pay taxes on it. And two, they've been refunding people that paid beyond 120 months. That's how good that program is. So that is a great. Ken, do we have something for her? For being so brave to be the first one?
Yes, we do. And a matter of fact, a few days ago, someone who used to work for Fulton County sent that same form to me, and because they had since separated and we did fill out that form to get them the credit for the 5 to 6 years that they worked with Fulton County that went towards their student loan repayment. So there is a way. So once we get the form, we can definitely process it. But it's just a matter of knowing that it's even available for you to continue to get that benefit, even though you might have switched from a qualified employer to a non-qualified employer. But you might want to come for this one. You don't want to do it.
So what is in there?
I'll let her say it.
I'll let her open it. So yes, if you know anyone that is working for Fulton County or any government agency, those are qualified employers. They could already be at 120 payments. I mean, it's a really good deal, you guys. You got until November 31st, or I'm sorry, October 31st. Let me get my dates right. So you got until Halloween to get that done. So so I'm not sure if there's any other HR people, but I know HR touch a lot of people. That is definitely something to either mention to them, or I feel like we're just not getting the word out enough, because I'm seeing a lot of people that's getting their loans forgiven. And some of these guys are doctors working for a hospital. These doctors making $300,000 and $400,000 a year. They probably have $500,000 in student loan, but once they're done with those 10 years, it's all wiped out, no taxes or nothing. I'm like, that's the best deal I've seen in a long time. So thank you for that question.
Yes, ma'am.
And my question centers around what you just asked you. I was gonna ask about the temporary waiver. So I'm already currently under that program. How do you check in? So they don't say anything, but I think the time is going by. So how do you know where you're at? Like how many more months you have left?
Okay, so she wants to know, how do you know your progress, how much you have left? What provider is your loan with?
It started off being Navient and it switched over to
Fed loan, yeah.
I think it's changing again.
It is about to change. Fed loan basically backed down, saying, oh, we don't want to do student loans anymore. I mean, it's a holy mess anyway. That's why I'm thinking there's a potential that they may extend that, the student loan pause a little bit longer, just because they've done nothing to like clean that up. So, okay, so your question is, how do you know what your progress is? How do you know how many payments you already have? And make sure that if you qualify, that you're gonna get your loans forgiven. Okay, so the step one is find out who your loan servicer is. We think it's Fed Loan. The second one is log on. If you don't already have an ID and a password, log on and see if they are already showing how many payments you have. You need to confirm that it's right. It's probably, so how long have you been with Fulton County?
Since 2007.
Okay, so, well, and that program started, oh girl, you're about to get your student loans forgiven. Yeah, if you've been with them since 2007, that program started in 2007, okay? So the first people that were eligible was 2017. And they had about a 90% rejection rate. Why such a high rejection rate? It was because people were on the wrong loans, the wrong repayment plans, and they weren't communicating that. So you need to be one on an income driven. So when you already made the first requirement. First requirement, you have to work for an eligible employee. Fulton County is an eligible employee. The second thing is you have to be on an income driven repayment plan or whatever type of student loan. Like if you had Fed loan, you couldn't be on a Fed loan. Okay. But the waiver says that even if you want, and these Fed loans are older, so if you haven't heard of them, that, you know, makes perfect sense. So then you want to you need to be able to look at what they're showing that you have. If you've been working in Fulton County since 2007, you should have well over 120 payments, unless you had a break in service, okay? So you would go in and see what they're showing. So let's say if they're showing 50 on-time payments. You're gonna tell them, or you're gonna think to yourself, that's wrong, right? So what you need to do is they'll have a employee certification form, and you would go to his HR people and say, hey, I need this form filled out. I've been working here since 2007. Can you look at my records and confirm this? This is what I have to fill out. They're gonna say, yes, we'll go ahead and fill this out for you. And they're gonna say, she's been working full-time since 2007. And this is how many, and then they will say, okay, so that means from 2007 to 2022, my math is horrible, but I'm guessing that's somewhere around, what, 15 years, okay? So 15 years, which is 150 payments, all you need is 20. So once you get the certification, now you have to stick with the process. So, you know, these are Fed loan people, they're not the most efficient, but you need to do your part and get that form filled out with how many months that you had, that you made on-time payments, that you work for the county, you turn it into them, and they'll have the process right on the website. And once you turn it into them, they will do whatever they do, take 10 times longer than it should, but they will eventually say, okay, we're showing 150 on-time payments for you. You have, you'll get a trophy. I think there's like a trophy that they show you. You get a trophy to say, you have made your requirement of 120 payments. So your loans have been forgiven. We have forgiven this much in loans, and you are done, and you have a zero balance. And I've heard, because a big question of mine was, well, if you made more than 120, did they refund the difference? And I've been hearing people say they refunded the difference. So that's gonna look really good for you. When you said, when I asked you how long you worked here, I thought you were gonna tell me a few years. But girl, you have already gotten to 120 one-time payments. You just need to go through the process. But please, like, now that's your day. That's what you said, what to do today? That's your today. Okay, that's your today. Okay, and whatever your balance is, if you want motivation, go look at your balance and think about that being completely gone. not paying tax on it or anything. And anybody you know that's in your department that also works for the county, please pass that on. And if they have no idea who their servicer is or anything, they can go to studentaid.gov. They've all heard of that. That's the main government Department of Education website, and they can start there to tell them who their servicer is. So good job, girl. I hope you, please let me know if you get that forgiven.
I
Thank you
believe
for that.
remember it's because of me. So
You
those
got a
ones,
$2 bill for her? He's got a stash up here. We can at least get that away. What else we got, you guys? Who else got a question? Who else want to save on their student loan? Okay.
My question is, what exactly do you use your HSA for? Because I know you can basically invest. And I know it's tied to, I guess, medical insurance, health insurance for your employees. But I guess I don't really understand what it's used for in terms of when we're talking about retirement savings.
Okay, so her question was about HSAs, health savings accounts. There's so much confusion around them, so thank you for asking that question. So again, an HSA is a health savings account. A lot of times they get confused with a flexible spending account, an FSA. They're very different. In order to have a health savings account, you have to be on a qualified high deductible plan. Now, even though the deductible is usually higher, the premium is usually lower. So that's the attraction, okay? So let's say, for instance, if a traditional health insurance plan was, let's say, $200 a month. The high deductible plan with an HSA might only be $80 a month. So you immediately save on the premiums, but obviously the deductible is higher. So that's the first hurdle to get over, to make sure you're on a qualified plan, and Fulton County does offer one of those. So once you get money in the HSA, you can use it for multiple ways. It's originally designed to help with healthcare expenses. Since the deductible is higher, the health savings account is supposed to help you in the meantime until you reach that higher deductible. So many people use it as they go. Normally, you're going to get a debit card from the provider of the HSA, and you can use it for current expenses. So if Fulton County is putting money in there for you, it's under your name, you can say, you know what, I want to use this as I go on expenses. You can use it that way. The second way you can use it, you can say, you know what, I only go to the doctor once a year, my regular physician. I have very low expenses when it comes to medical stuff. So what am I going to do with the money? Just let it sit there? No, you can save it and just keep it in there for something big. Some people like to do that. Like, I'm going to have surgery next year, so I kind of want that to build up, and I don't want it in the market because I don't want to put it at risk. So you can put money in there. The contributions are tax-free, so you're lowering your taxable income. You don't even pay FICA tax. You don't even pay Social Security and Medicare taxes on that, as long as you get it through payroll deduction, okay? And then you can spend it down on expenses that you incur for medical purposes. You can save it, maybe for something big, or the last thing is invest it. Now, that's what I did because it worked for me, but that's not the only way to use it. The reason I invested it was because I was able to cash flow all of our expenses. And basically, me and my daughter would go to our annual visits to the doctor, and that was about it. And those were free. I'm on like one medication, it's a high blood pressure medication, and that's almost nothing. My daughter has asthma. We had, every now and then, we had some asthma medication that we had to get, but I was able to cash flow it out. So I wasn't interested in touching the money I had in the HSA. I started investing it. It has a menu of different mutual funds you can choose from, just like your 401k. You choose that and you can invest in it and let it grow. Now, if you expect to use the money, you don't really want to put that part in the stock market or invest it, because if you need it available, I would say less than 5 years, you definitely want to try to keep that safe, because you don't know what the market's going to be doing, and you don't want to have to take your money out, and then all of a sudden the market's down and what you put in is way lower than it was when you first put it in. So that's how health savings account, mostly when people talk about them, they talk about the triple tax savings, and what that is tax-free going in. It's tax-free while it's in there and while it grows if you happen to invest, and then when you take it out, it's tax-free. And that defies all the normal rules, like with a Roth and a traditional, either you're gonna pay taxes in the beginning or the end. With an HSA, you don't pay taxes in the beginning, you don't pay taxes at the end, you don't pay taxes in the middle. And the nice bonus beyond the triple tax savings is if you get payroll deduction through your employer, through Fulton County, you don't even pay FICA tax on that. So you don't pay towards, and that's, FICA tax is 6.2%, 7.5%. So we pay 7.5% towards Social Security and Medicare. You know, it comes right about a check, so we don't even pay attention to it. But when you're putting money in an HSA, you don't pay that if it's through payroll. So that's basically how the health savings accounts work. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Okay, we got another question? Whoever was next?
Oh, well, you need to go for your $2.
Yes, we got a $2 bill for you.
You guys remember that 1980s movies with
So I can't see who was next.
the newspaper guy said
Okay.
$2.
Virginia? Okay, oh, we got 5 more minutes? Okay, so we're gonna keep going until we hit the 12 o'clock mark. We got 5 minutes, so I saw your hand.
So, I don't know a lot about the agencies either, so that information, if you share this.
Wonderful.
Informative. Also, I listened to your episode on the Right to Watch.
Oh, yes, yes.
About agency.
Thank you.
But my question is, if you have one retired, can you use that to cover the premium, like for a plan that you might get on exchange?
Oh, great question. So her question is, with the money inside your health savings account, and again, thinking about it as retirement, can you use those funds in an HSA account to pay for your premiums when you retire, before you get Medicare? Okay, there are only a few exceptions. So generally the answer would be no, but like every IRS provision, there are exceptions. Here are the exceptions. If you are on COBRA, you can use it to pay COBRA premiums. If you are on health insurance while you're collecting unemployment benefits, you can use it to pay your premiums for that. Or once you're on Medicare, you can't contribute to an HSA because it's not a qualified plan, but your existing funds in an HSA, you can use it to pay your Medicare premiums. And those Medicare premiums in 2022 is $170 a month. Some people think it's free, but it's not. Part B, the hospital insurance, Part A, that's free. But Part B, where you go see a doctor and things like that, that's $170 a month in 2022, and it typically goes up each year, so you can use it for those. So generally the answer is no, you can't use it towards your health insurance premiums, but those 3 exceptions you can use to pay premiums. And I guess the only other one that might be remote would be you can use it to pay long-term care premiums. So, gotta give her a $2 bill. Great question, thank you. Somebody else had their hand up. Now you guys gotta tell me who was next, because I haven't been watching.
I was not watching yet, so I'll just go with the young lady with the blonde hair.
Hi, my question is, you spoke about being part of an investment club. Can you share which club you're in?
Yes, so she's asking about the Investment Club. The Investment Club is supported by a nonprofit organization called Better Investing, and the site is betterinvesting.org. And right after my divorce, I was looking for like-minded people, and I discovered that I was very interested in the stock market and investing, and they had a local chapter in my area. And I live in Dayton, and the one I ended up going to was Cincinnati. They met once a month, and it was just amazing to be around all these smart people, way smarter than me, about investing. And I know that there are several Atlanta chapters, Georgia chapters of Better Investing. So if you go to betterinvesting.org and you look for an investment club or look for a chapter, you can find it there. And their whole thing is investment clubs and individual investors that want to invest in individual stocks on their own. They're very heavy with the stock analysis and, looking at earnings and growth and sales and all of that type of stuff. It was very empowering to me. That gave me enough comfort to know I need to have my money in the market, if anything. So, good question.
And I'll also add, that right before the pandemic, we were looking at it from an HR perspective. We were looking at a number of different quote unquote clubs that we could start within Fulton County that could, build morale. We talked about an investment club. We talked about a company manager's book club. We talked about oh God, I can't remember it right. But anyway, but I think that's something that, if we have enough individuals like yourself and your coworkers interested in forming that type of organization, so you have that, when we're in right outside of food and we're sitting down for lunch and we're meeting and we talk about investments, we can talk about that there as well. So that's something that we had in the back of our minds. So you don't have to feel that you're going to have to be out there on your own to pursue it, but trying to bring some sense of normalcy back to the workplace after we're starting to reassimilate after COVID. So look out for that. Oh, ma'am, you can come.
We got a $2 bill for you.
She's making me spend my $2 bills instead of hers.
And thank you for the question. All right, who we got next?
Coretta.
So, during this COVID, I've been, looking at my finances, all that kind of stuff, and I paid down, I think like 2 credit cards.
Yay, congratulations.
Lunch money, I call it lunch money. But one of the issues that I had about a year ago was the credit card that I had, and I got it through some program with the business. The credit card company no longer work with that company anymore, so they closed the account. So my credit score dropped 30 points based on the debt ratio. I lost the what you call it,
The available credit, so your utilization went
I
up?
lost all that.
Okay.
So it was a total of about 30 points.
Okay.
How can I fix it?
Okay, so she said that the question is around credit. So she had an account that got closed down, and as a result, your credit score dropped 30 points. Now, how recent was this?
Not a year ago.
Okay, not a year ago. Have you been checking it on a regular basis? Okay, so you hit the nail on the head. It wasn't the act of the account being closed, it was the utilization and available credit, right? So the ways to fix that is paying down your other debt to get that total utilization rate down, the amount that you're using versus what you have available. Being under 30% is ideal. Being under 10% is probably even better. So over time, as you get that paid down, you're gonna see that change. Now, for some reason, if you had, a big chunk that you can knock out, it would immediately go back up probably. But that utilization, that accounts for 30% of your credit score. So that's a really big, important part. The only other thing you can do is if you had more credit available. So like, let's say if you had another car or you got an increase, that would help, lower that ratio. So those are the only 2 things you can really do to get that fixed. But as long as, let's say if you're at a 40% utilization rate, that still is gonna keep your credit score low. But if you start knocking it out and now it's going from 40% to 30% to 20% that you're utilizing, that will look better. And also it helps if you decide you wanna start, paying more of that credit card down before the statement closes, because they just report to the credit bureaus the day as of the last day of that cycle and when they issue your statement. So let's say if you had $5,000 on there and you paid $1,000, maybe you bought something big and you paid $1,000, it's gonna show whatever the balance was on the closing date of that statement, and that's what's gonna show up. So those are the few things that you can do, but honestly, your problem, that's the easier of the problems, because like, for instance, if people have missed payments and late payments, those are harder, and it's not much you can do about those, unless it was a mistake and then you can dispute it. But the utilization, just either paying it down or getting more available credit is the only way you're gonna get that utilization rate lower.
And Coretta, if you don't mind, you can come for your $2 as well.
We got $2 for you.
And credit is one of the programs that we plan to bring Jackie back on to go much more deeper dive into what it is, how to secure it, how to improve it, and and talking about it. And then just ask you another question. If there are any other questions, So which method do you prefer? Snowball, focus on the interest, or focus on the payment? Which?
So my answer to that, so repayment, strategies for repaying back your loans. So some people do snowball where they'll take the smallest one first. Some people will sort of do it the best mathematical way and they'll do the highest interest rate first. And my answer to that is whichever is gonna motivate you the most to get it paid off. The important thing that you just did is you thought about the fact that you wanna pay it off. So there's no wrong way. And some people are simply more motivated by knowing that they have knocked out a small card and then they go at it with a lot more energy. Other people are like an engineer, they're always gonna think about things in terms of, financially, which is the best one. I need to hit the highest interest credit card first. And I guess I can say, if you've got a really high rate, let's say if it's at a payday loan or it's a credit card that's like 25%, those you wanna try to knock out before you would go for like student loan payments that's pretty low or a mortgage that might be pretty low. That's when I would sort of at least rank what to pay off first. But if you've got 5 credit cards, you can either line them up based on which one has the highest interest rate or which one has the lowest balance. There's no wrong way to do it. Whichever way is going to get you the most motivated and most fired up. So that's my question to that.
And then I'll just piggyback off of that and ask, if my memory doesn't fail me during that speaking at the time. Dispel, myth or fact. If you have unutilized credit cards, should you go into your credit card or should you call those credit card agencies and say, let me close those credit cards?
Okay, that is a big myth. So should you close down credit lines that you're not using? Okay, who thinks that you should? Who thinks that you should not close down credit cards that you're not using? Okay, so you guys are right, you guys are on it. You don't have to close down the credit card. The only time I would say close down the credit card is if it's too tempting and you've had trouble getting overextended with debt. Barring that, don't close down your credit line. Last time I checked my credit report, it said I had 29 open credit cards. And I only use like 3, but I don't close down the lines because to her question, it's gonna keep my utilization high or my utilization low, my available credit very high. The only time, and I think this is where the myth comes from, the only time where that matters is a lot of times when you're getting a mortgage, the underwriter may not want to see a lot of available credit and a lot of credit cards because they think it may be tempting for you to get into debt. So for the purposes of your credit score, you don't really want to close down those lines. But if you're getting a mortgage and the underwriter doesn't like seeing, if they come back and say you need to close down some of these cards, I guess you go ahead and do it or whatever. But for your credit score, it's really not going to matter, or it's gonna, if anything, it's going to help you because your available credit is going to be much higher by keeping those credit lines open. So dispel that myth. What's your question? And we owe you a $2 bill. Or wait a minute, he asked that question. Okay, he doesn't. You'll get one though.
As it relates to the credit card, if you haven't used it in a while. So I went into the store thinking this card, I just don't use it when, to try to keep it active.
Right.
And I found out they had closed it. I didn't realize time had passed like it did. How often should you use it to keep it open and not, have that happen? Because I got one right now I haven't used in 2 years. And I don't want that to happen to me. And it's like, I couldn't find nothing to buy. I was like, I don't like none of this. So.
Use it for gas.
Okay.
But yes, to your point. So the thing is, all of these credit card companies work a little differently, right? So there's no one federal rule that says it must be this, okay? I had one card that I think I went a couple of years without using it. They said they later talking about they're gonna shut it down. Or no, they told me they already shut it down. Well, I couldn't do anything about it. Then there was another company that said, hey, we noticed you haven't used your credit card in 2 years, and unless you make a charge within the next 90 days, we're gonna close it down. So of course I go to the gas station and make a charge, no problem. So they have different processes. So I would say at least once a year. You know what I started doing? If I have a bill, I'll put like a bill set up for automatic payment. So for instance, maybe my cell phone bill, maybe my utility bill, maybe my Amazon Prime or something like that. Something really small, I'll put it on that card. And I make sure I do that with my oldest card, because then, you know, your length of credit history factors into your credit score as well. So if you have older cards, make sure your older cards don't get shut down. That does a lot for your credit score. So make sure if you're not using it or you think you're gonna use it anymore for whatever reason, at least put like some kind of small subscription or use it for gas, you know, once a year or however often, to make sure it doesn't get shut down. Because some of them, you know, certain banks I don't even like to deal with anymore because I don't like how they do business, right? I'm thinking it was Capital One. I hadn't used theirs in a long time, and I really appreciated that they sent me that letter that said, if you don't use it in the next 90 days, okay. I'm like, okay, I'm going to the restaurant today, that's done, no problem. And now I know that that's sort of their watermark of how long they want it to be unutilized. So I immediately just put like Netflix or something on that one, just to make sure it stayed in it, because that was an older card, and I didn't want it to get shut down. So there you go. And get your $2 bill.
All right, so we have, the show has come, and we have exactly 10 more minutes that they're gonna wait for us. But what we wanted to do, as just one closing item, is I have the calculator up. And anyone who wants to find out where they can then fire them, because we want you to stay. Fulton County wants you to stay, and make sure that's absolutely clear. But if you want to identify your fire number, you're willing to give us your some data points, we can put it into the calculator, start your brain process churning as to, hey, I can leave in 14 years at 49. So whoever wants to volunteer, let me know. I'll go to the podium and put that in, and then we'll once again Tim and Jackie for gracing us for 2 hours and providing all this insight. And like I said, you will see her again in a number of different smaller, actually specific workshops relative to credit, relative to student loan payments and the like, as well as the other individuals that are all part of this Fulton Gets Financially Fit program, where we're really focusing on the employee to make sure, just like how we encourage you to do your wellness examination, because we know the big impact that does just by you knowing your quote unquote numbers. This is the other number that you need to know from a financial standpoint as well. So any volunteers for the calculator?
We'll make it worth your time. Okay, there we go, right there. Come on to the podium. Come to the mic. You want me to run it, Ken, or you got it?
I got it.
Okay. So now there's
It's a disclaimer. You cannot go once you see this number, okay?
Yeah. So yeah, just go to the mic there, okay? So yeah, so what we're about to do, this is one of the many compound growth and retirement calculators. This happens to be one of my favorite, but find one and start playing with your numbers. So what's your name? Monica. Okay, so Monica, we're gonna start with just close. I hate to ask a lady her age.
That's exactly my age.
45, look at that. Okay, so we got that right. So you don't have to say what your annual income is. Is it okay to assume 80, or do you want to change that to 60 or something lower?
Just down to 72.
Okay, let's take that down to 72, okay. And then what do you think your expenses are? Have you ever looked at your expenses, or can you guess what those might be?
I kind of guessed, and I was.
Remember, you're gonna take out for taxes, you're gonna take out for what you're contributing to your retirement account.
Let's say 38,000.
Okay, I'll put in 38,000. So look, you're already on the right track. You got a $72,000 income and you got $38,000 worth of expenses. Now look at that, okay? So now, your current net worth, if you had to guess that, we can put 0, but
Yeah, I'm not.
okay, think about this. Think about what you might have in your retirement account. We can start there.
Yeah, okay.
Because that's part of your net worth.
I'm gonna say 140, maybe.
Okay, let's say 140, okay? And then now asset allocation, this is a fancy word, with meaning which bucket do you want your investments to be in? You got stocks, bonds, and cash. Now, as far as cash, if you're talking about your retirement account, there's really, it might be cash equivalent in there, but we can just put 0 for that one. No, not, so for stocks, so now we're gonna look at the stocks and bonds. Now, bonds are that fixed income that doesn't grow as good as stocks. You might get 2 or 3% return on that. So do you happen to know what you're investing in? If not, that's one of your jobs today. Okay? So I'm gonna make, so what do you wanna assume, Ken, for stocks versus bonds? She's 45. 90-10? Okay, now this might not be exactly right. Now, we got one last thing for you, okay? Expected rate of return. Now, cash, you put 0 because you don't have any cash. For the stocks, I think bonds is about right 2% because they're not doing so good right now. I feel like 7 is a little low for stocks, especially everything's down right now. It's gonna bounce back pretty good, I'm sure. So what do you think on that? Okay, let's do 9. All right, so you see that thing moving, so scroll up and let's take a look. So they're saying in 11, you're gonna retire in 11 years by age 56. And they're, in the background is running the 4% rule, and it's showing that orange line that you see, that's how much you've saved, and the portfolio, that's how much growth you've got. That means that the growth of your money is doing all the hard work. The yellow line is what you've done. The orange line is what your money is doing by being invested. And you're not having to go to work you're not having to do really anything to get that money grown. And it's assuming that it's taking the difference between your expenses and your income, and it's assuming that much is being saved. Now, this is just, just a high level look, but hey girl, I'll see you in 11 years. So that's pretty darn good. Now Ken, you got something for her? Thank you for being our guinea pig there. You are getting, so you see how that works, and you see how just knowing your numbers is just empowering to figure that out. So that's for you. Thank you for coming up and giving us all your numbers there. So that was fun. I love to play with these calculators. Can we give her a round of applause? Very good. When I do the net worth, I'm just putting in the equity. So whatever the loan is or the value of the house, I deduct the loan that I have, that's the equity. And I probably have about 70, 80% equity in my home. So it's close to being paid for. But yeah, you just want the equity. So normally if you have 2 columns, you'll have assets, which would be the value of the home, and you have liabilities. The liabilities is the mortgage that you have. And basically they kind of net out. Yeah, so that's, and when you go to a network calculator, they'll have fields for everything. And they're pretty good these days where they will come up with every possible way you would, have things that would fall either under assets or liabilities. So you're gonna do yours today or this week? Okay. All right. We got somebody, and I'll keep going till you guys want to say stop. Is age?
Yeah.
I mean, if we change, hold on.
Let's change
If you
it.
keep the same areas, and you change the age to maybe like 35.
Oh yeah, that's gonna look really
35
good.
years,
Yeah, so you want to change it to 35? Okay, let's change it to
keep
35.
everything else the same, and then maybe do like 65.
Okay, so we'll change this to 35. Let's see how it changed. Oh, you're still in 11 years, but then you'll be 46. So that's how you fire financial independence, retire early. So it's not really, so it's more dependent on how much time your money has to grow. That's like when I was 38, I did it in about 10 years, but if I would have wised up sooner at like, let's say 30, it would have made a difference. Maybe I would have retired a whole lot earlier. Did you get a $2 bill already? Well, we got a $2 bill for you. All right, you guys, I'm just hanging out with y'all. Any other questions, any burning questions or debates you've been having with somebody? Okay, go ahead.
With the ups and downs right now, with the market,
like I need something else. I just want this pool of money to be everywhere. So is that where should I start, or, I'm looking at different things. I know you said Rob Hood, I'm doing that already. I let my son handle that because he quick on the fingers, so.
Okay.
But I want to do something else that I feel is a little, I guess.
That's not in the stock market?
Yeah, that's safer, and it still grows. It doesn't have to grow, quickly, real fast, but it just continues to grow over time, and I can always dip if I need to.
Yeah, in times like this, the market has been down significantly for the year, but the market has been like on a tear since 2008. So we're overdue for a pullback. So this is normal. It doesn't feel good, but it is normal. And for you, you're saying, where else can I put my money that's not in the stock market, that doesn't have these crazy fluctuations? So part of that is really what you're invested in, not necessarily an account. It's the type of investments in the account. So bonds are the safer ones, but bonds aren't returning hardly anything. For you, I would say look at I-bonds, okay? Right now, they're all the rage because the money that you put in is completely safe. It would never go down less than that. Right now, they change the interest rate change every 6 months. The prior 6 months was 7.62%. And in May, it changed to 9.12%. And I'm guessing the next 6 months, it will probably be up there. So a lot of people are throwing money there. Now, the drawback is that you can only do $10,000 a year. Maybe that's fine. But after a year, you have to keep it in there at least a year. But after a year, you can take out the money if you want to. There's no penalty or anything like that. But you will get penalized the most recent 3 months worth of interest, which is not horrible, right? You still got your principal. If you keep it for at least 5 years, you wouldn't pay that 3-month penalty. So that's a pretty nice deal, especially if you're looking at it for a slightly longer term. You just can't beat something that's where the principal is completely safe. With stocks, it is not. It fluctuates, and it's really scary to see a lot of your money zigzagging like that. And while it's down now, it doesn't feel good to anybody. I mean, I shouldn't do this, but I'm not as excited to check my accounts when the market is like this, right? But I know it's going to come back, but I'll be like, when I look at it.
Well, that's how I'm feeling right now, because I did check mine probably a few weeks ago. It was in the back of my mind to check it anyway, but I just forced myself. And I saw it with my own eyes, but I also called. I said, "Can you tell me if these numbers are right?"
Oh, yeah. And the other thing, on the flip side of that, if you're obviously a current employee, so you're probably putting new money in there. It is a perfect time to put new money in there. So if anyone is not already getting, the match with like doing the 457 and getting that extra 2% match, now's a really good time, because since the market's down, the new money that's going in is getting it at a deal. So I know that I started most of my investing and saving, a lot of the heavy lifting, it started right after 2008. And I didn't know it at the time, it's just luck. But the market was down significantly. And I know that a big part of how my net worth grew and how my investments grew was because I really started my heavy lifting when the market went down, like the worst it had gone down in my lifetime. And that helped me a lot, because when it came back, it bounced like a trampoline, and it made a big difference. So the new money going in, you can feel good about that because you're getting at a much lower price. So yeah.
And again, if you are interested in catching the shuttle, it's outside. I don't think I can keep them waiting any longer. So, but thank you very much. And for the individuals following us on YouTube, I'll add, and maybe we just end on this note here, Jackie, the last word is that we all think that there's no more flexibility in our budgets to do anything with. Our budgets are stretched thin, but there's always flexibility. You might have, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus. And the question you have to ask yourself, do you need 4 streaming services that you will never be able to watch all the content on one? Or could you trim out some of those streaming services and allocate those resources to something else? And my son is going to kill me for this, but I brought a prop. So, we talk about we always want our kids to look nice when they're in school. You know, that was something that I did growing up. But the one difference was I was working from 12. And you know, we would indulge and buy our kids, $300 pair of Air Jordans. And then you have them walking funny because they can't crease your Air Jordans. You have to be walking like a duck, flat-footed. And God forbid someone in school steps on your Air Jordans that are brand new. That's a complete difference. So what I started to do with my son was I started to buy him these. So these are and ones. These are by Shaquille O'Neal. They're nice looking, right? Like everybody was, these are nice looking, clean sand.
They're nice.
And I have a pair, so I'm walking the walks. I'm not having Air Jordans and he has the and ones. We all wear the and ones. But the difference is, these are, what's that price? And Jackie can tell me, Jackie can keep me honest.
Okay.
Jackie, read the price.
Oh, no. It says $15.88.
$15.88.
God.
And then I splurged, and I got the Dr. Scholl's inserts from Walmart for $15. So the inserts cost more than the shoes.
Oh, my gosh.
And they do the exact same thing. So, and they're nice looking, right? You guys thought they were nice looking?
I thought they were animals.
They are animals.
How's that possible?
They are animals. It's just, again, changing your shopping habits and the way you go to shop. So, if that money is now going into his, his 529 plan.
Oh,
So-
excellent.
So his sneaker money, instead of going in his shoes, is going into his 529 plan retirement account. So again, you could do it, you just need to change one habit, one expenditure, and get the ball going towards saving and investing, and then of course involving your kids along the way, because if they can get it sooner than we ever exposed to it, I think that's the win-win, and that's what we're always pushing. You know, not only your financial health, but the generational wealth and health for your family members that are in your household and the next generation to come. So again, thank you very much, Jackie. We look forward to working with you much more into the future. I want to thank my staff, Virginia and Brenda, for making this possible. The staff at the Auburn Research Library, one of the county's great facilities. And for you, Fulton County employees who took the time during your day, I know we ran a little over the 2 hours, but I think it was well worth it to have this type of information provided to you in a format that made sense. From an individual who we could technically consider a Fulton County employee, since she made roughly what the average salary is for a Fulton County employee, and I'm glad that she used that in examples. But like I said, the goal, and this was very poignant this week, Jackie, you may not be aware, but this is also Fulton County Employee Appreciation.
Oh, wow.
So for the next couple of days, we're going to be celebrating the employees, so this was a great way for us to kick off the event by focusing on something a little different. It's not customer service, it's not how to do your job. This is really truly how to be a more rounded individual within your respective nuclear family. So again, thank you very much. Thank you guys for participating, and look forward to many more financially fit programs into the future.
Thank you, guys. Awesome. Thank you, guys. This was so much fun.